Thank you. Don't forget to sign into the document. I'll put a link in the chat again. Any new faces? I don't see any, unless I'm mistaken. Release planning. Do we have any updates?
I guess I had a question about releasing the spec. I know we had trimmed the build pack 07 and platform 08 APIs of features that are not related to SBOM, and the work for that is completed. I think we're just awaiting approvals on those spec PRs and a release of the spec. I just anything that we can do to move it along.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that today. I think Terrence had taken it over from Emily, and Terrence is out right now, so I had told him that I would take care of it. So at least the release part is on me, and I probably need to approve PRs or something too, and we can do it without Terrence's approval.
Okay, awesome. If you needed help with like the release notes or anything, I can provide some stuff.
Yes, feel free to badger me about it if I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Any other release planning updates?
On the lib CNB side, thanks to Daniel, we've got the library up to date with build pack 07. I think this is the first time we'll be trying to cut an alpha release rather than like a stable release, since the API isn't out yet, but the Paketo folks want to use it in their downstream libraries. It's mainly alpha because like the API might change before it's merged to the spec, so we don't want to commit to anything that would be backwards incompatible. But that's pretty much it. I'll be trying to make a alpha release today, hopefully after this meeting. Oh, there's Daniel. Cool. I was just talking about the alpha release. Thanks for that.
Cool. All right. Are we ready to move on to discussing the RFCs? Any other updates before that? All right. First one is system build packs. This is mine actually. And I think we've discussed this in the past, but now that the official build packs RFC, actually it's finished with FCP today, so that'll be finalized probably today. So we're ready to now talk about the system build pack RFC, and the proposal. Here, I'll share this real quick. The proposal uses a new system table in Builder Toml, where you can define pre and post build packs, very similar to the pre and post that you can use in your build pack groups in Project Toml. And essentially working the same way, which is why they're outside of the order, so they don't need to be explicitly added to every group. I think there was some discussion around how they sort of like materialize into the groups. But yeah, also curious how they're defined in the builder, how people think they should be defined in the builder. So. There may not be a lot of discussion on this today. I don't know. I think Steven was one of the folks that was commenting a bunch, and Terrence, so.
It's been a while since I looked at this RFC, but can you state again, like where they would be released from? Like, are they, like, would they be part of a life cycle image, or would they be part of?
No, so they'd be part of a builder. So, like a really concrete example, the shell specific logic, it's removed from the life cycle, and so that behavior is gone. And then the Heroku builder, because the Heroku, the owners of the Heroku builder want to keep that like dot profile behavior and things like that, would add a system pre-build pack that replicates that bash behavior, that shell behavior. So that means that not every build pack or every builder would have that, right? And I think that makes sense, because if you are building images from scratch, or you don't want to have shell, a shell as part of the build or as part of the launch image, then that's the whole reason for removing it from lifecycle, or part of the reason for removing it from lifecycle. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Could you talk a little bit more about why this is necessary, as opposed to just, in this use case that you mentioned, just adding the bash profile build pack to every group in an order, like instead of a system level? Like, what's the...
Yeah, because the main reason is that we want it to be added even if there's a custom group. So like if someone provides -b on the pack CLI command, or in a project toml, essentially, like, the goal in doing this and having the system build pack is to make it less of a normal build pack and more of just a behavior that's a part of that builder, or that that build, so to speak. So even if you can imagine in the Heroku case where where we're really focusing on like the developer experience, and we want users to not have to think about things like, oh, how do I get my dot profile to run? Even if they're specifying custom build packs, we want that to be something they don't have to think about.
Okay. And looking at the RFC, there's no way to actually like configure this or mutate this, right? It's the idea behind it is you could keep all of them enabled or disable all of them. There's no in between.
Correct. Yeah, I did throw in a disable system build packs. I don't think it's necessary to like tweak one or some of them on and off. Like, if people have opinions about let's say there's 3 system build packs and they only want one of them, it's very easy to disable all of them, and then, as you were saying, manually include the one you want in your custom build pack group. So it can be done. And I think this needing to tweak them is already sort of an advanced capability. So I'm not too worried about that being a little awkward.
Okay. So they're not special in their execution more than it is how you interact with them from a user perspective.
Yeah, there is. They are not special in their execution, depending on where we settle on the build plan stuff. I think most of us, I think I also am leaning towards just build plan works like normal. But I could also see reasons for just totally disabling build plan. But otherwise, yeah.
Are there plans to limit what build packs could be used as system build packs, like only allowing like build pack project, like the ones that we publish to be used there.
No, there's definitely nothing in the RFC about limiting them. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that much. I definitely could see where people might misunderstand the mechanism and use it in the wrong way. But I also definitely could imagine builder owners wanting to put something, very custom as their own system build pack. So I would want to leave the door open to just a totally custom system build pack.
Yeah, especially if you're thinking about the use case where you disable them and then be able to take that build pack and put it in the order, right? Or yeah, being able to kind of, treat them as modular things, and it's just whether you interact with them. I would also say that it's probably not worth limiting which ones are there. I think then they become something different, right? Then they are really system build packs that aren't build packs, like standard build packs. They're not ordered build packs and so forth. And I guess with that same mentality, I would say that that statement about whether or not they influence the build plan kind of affects that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about too, is if you can't influence the build plan, you're going to be limited to what's going to work in the system build packs anyway, because some things depend on build plan entries.
I think that's all the more reason for build plan just to work the same way.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll think through what the implications of that might be, because I really hadn't. So.
Yeah, I wonder too. I mean, if there are implications, maybe it's just a matter of build plan TOML needing to be like, have a flag like system build pack okay or something like that just would validate that particular build pack can work there.
Yep. Well, so yeah, give this a look if you have some time, and I think it's going to be a little while before we finalize it with the holidays and stuff, so it's not super urgent. But I just as a reminder, I would like to get this finalized before we ship the removal of shell specific logic, so that so the Heroku builder at least can have a bash build pack of some kind.
Right. I feel like this was probably said already, but there was a separate RFC for the pre and post build packs in a group. Is that, I know that was approved, but is that sort of now on hold?
No. Yeah, I don't think that's been implemented, but that's the only thing that's holding that back was like the pack TOML and some of the discussion around project descriptor changes. Yeah, so I think that's really on me, but we finalized that right before we did the big schema change, and now I think that's sort of put to bed. I should probably go back and implement that RFC, but I don't think there's anything about that conflicts with this, because after you process the pre and post from like a build pack or from a package TOML, the end result is just a normal group. So we may need to specify that like system build packs come after that, but they would work exactly the same way because it's still just a group at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I think the way I see it is standard defined build packs are in the center, right? And then outside of that, there's the pre and post user defined build packs. And then outside of that is the system build packs.
I think that makes sense. I do worry that it's a lot of, for someone who's not as familiar with our project, it could be confusing. I know that, I feel like that could be mitigated, but I just want to call that out as a.
No, that's totally fair. And I think that's a part of why, with the system build packs, I want it to be a very transparent thing. And like I even proposed, I think in the RFC, it says that they wouldn't be shown, like when you run a build and it shows the build packs that are detected, that it wouldn't actually show system build packs. So that as a user, for the most part, you don't need to think about them because they are provided by the builder. You don't have control over them. They're essentially like a behavior that's specific to that builder. I think that's probably a little bit contentious because I know some folks want them to show up just like any other build pack would in a group. But that also could sort of force you to have to think about the things that you were talking about, Natalie. So.
Yeah, but I think there could be like a good middle ground if how they're displayed is, appropriate, or maybe if it's only in verbose mode, right? But I think it's definitely worth seeing what all is executing.
Yeah, agree. Cool. All right. I think we can move on to the next one, which is SBOM. I think it's Anthony.
Yep, sure. I'll spearhead this. Can y'all see this? Cool. So I see a couple others on the call who weren't here before. So just a brief overview. The objective of this RC is to give a more complete SBOM to the application image, right? We had the previous SBOM RC for basically packages that the build packs would provide, right? But to get the full picture of the application image for scanning tools, down the chain, it'd be nice to have something for the stack as well, right? So presumably stack authors could put a bomb in a certain location, and then we could append the digest or the diff ID somewhere on as a label. And maybe down the chain there could be some merging, but merging was cut out of scope for this RFC, right? For the most part, we just want it there. So there were some unresolved questions which aren't written down here, but I do remember them, right? I know Stephen was another big voice in this, but for the most part, I think our last point was whether we even want this SBOM in the stack image at all, right? Because I believe, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Like for us to have this process where we inject the SBOM as part of the stack image and then apply the label, this base image would have to be modified, right? Like, if you think about this base image as this pristine, immutable container image that all the application image is built on top of, right? We presumably don't want to modify it in some way, right? But then that begs the question: where do we even put this SBOM JSONs, right?
I think, wasn't it long term that we thought about maybe moving it to kind of like a sidecar artifact similar to Coastline? Is that the kind of worms that we opened? That
Yep.
It is, yeah. And Stephen explicitly said that doing cosign, not just for this, but for build pack SBOMs too, is sort of deserves its own separate RFC and thought process and discussion, right? Like this if we were to do that, right? Like basically we just have to draft up a whole another RFC and then think about it separately, right? That was his opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird that if we try to push the run image SBOM into that separate artifact, OCI artifact, it is strange that right now the way that SBOM for build packs or for the application is going, those are all kind of baked into the image.
I mean, that's from a build pack author or user perspective, they don't know it will end up in the app image. Like, I mean, if you just consider build pack API, they just put the bomb in a specific place and it will be restored in that place on rebuilds. There's like, even if we do move the bombs to a separate image, like it wouldn't change the build pack API. It will change the platform API. It wouldn't change the build pack API.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. The platform API is really the one I'm concerned about, right? Because that's from an external perspective.
So the other thing is we have full control over the build pack API and how they're executed and where and how the layers are created, and not so much for the run image. At least for the application layers, we can guarantee certain things about who modified them, or we can, like, the lifecycle can put diff IDs and other things to identify other layers to ensure that the content is actually not tampered with. In this case, it's a bit weird, like unless we create some more tooling to actually modify the base image, have it work eventually with rebase, and have it work with eventually with like the whole merge thing we wanted to do. So those were like the only considerations here. Like in terms of the build back API at least, like it wouldn't change in the future, even if we went on to merge things, or even if we moved it to a separate artifact. This, however, would. So I'm just
Sorry, I guess I'm just not fully clear on that last statement. Yes, the build pack API doesn't change, but the bombs would still be written in the application image by lifecycle. I mean, do we want those? Would we want, for parity's sake, to move it to like a sidecar image? Is that?
I think that's like eventually that would be better, probably, and we can do that without affecting build back authors or the user experience. The thing that will have to change is like the things reading the SBOM. I agree, but if the whole industry is going to standardize on like some kind of SBOM format like that, hopefully the tools reading these SBOMs will already support it.
Okay. All right. I guess I wish Stephen was here for this, but it looks like long term, we all know what we want, right? Long term, we want a cosine-esque solution where the bombs are in a separate artifact, right? But what do we want in short term, right? Let's just say, we did just do this whole SBOM track of work for the build packs, and we just accomplished the RFC as it was written, right? Like, do we want to leave it just incomplete, at least from CNB's perspective?
I mean, as I said, like this thing seems fine to me currently if we just use pack to create the final run image. What bothers me is how this would impact the Docker files RFC, which, I mean, we're all considering that to be an FCP, but like this is introducing a new format that the other one can potentially not easily follow, especially because like it won't have, like we don't have a solution yet for generating these SBOMs for the run image on the other RFC. So like these RFCs are currently in motion, and I don't want to I'm not particularly keen on introducing things that we'll have to change almost immediately. That's the only inhibition I have for this RFC, taking into consideration all the other things that we're currently working on.
So if I understand correctly, the concern with the Docker files RFC is that because you could then execute any arbitrary command on the run image, it could essentially change or invalidate the SBOM that's baked into it.
And even if we do provide a binary to regenerate that SBOM, that binary has to live somewhere, right?
And packages, right?
Sorry?
Isn't it gem packages? Wasn't that the solution in the RFC?
That's for build, yes. For runtime, I'm definitely not keen on introducing a binary just for generating SBOM in the output image. That should not be in the output image. Like a binary for generating, like inspecting your file system layers and generating an SBOM, that should not end up in the output application image. That goes against our like ideal of creating minimal secure images that don't contain anything that's not necessary.
Okay, I understand, but let's get an ideal here. So ideally, we would have tooling to build. Let's say the support Docker files RC. We would have tooling to build the run image at least how we want it, right? Is that how you imagine that
Sorry,
working?
Tooling to build run image, like for this RFC?
No, for the support Docker files. Does that make sense? Like we'd have tooling that consumes the Docker file,
yeah,
and then builds it, with the right metadata and with the SBOM. Would that appeal to you in an ideal world?
I mean, tooling, yes, which doesn't end up in the output image, yes. The constraints are whatever tools we build should not end up in the output image. The SBOM ending up in the output image is fine. The tools, not so much.
I think that's a slippery slope, right? It's just, again, right? You think about where we're coming from. We're trying to remove stacks. We're trying to remove mixins. We're trying to remove the tooling and the abstractions around these things, right? Like, and then if you're saying, hey, we need to do more than a Docker file, right, to make the run image, or it might feel like it's another confusing thing again, right? Which we're trying to get away from. That's my only premature thought.
I think we're on the same page there. I'm just saying that the other RFC currently doesn't have a way of doing such a thing. This RFC as it is completely fine. I'm just saying that it seems like it'll be very short term, because like as soon as we introduce the Docker files RFC, we won't have an equivalent which we will have for this RFC. I'm assuming the tooling that we create for this RFC is just like pack, and then you run pack attach SBOM on an existing image, and it creates a new one with the SBOM attached in the right place. I'm just saying that would be very hard in the dynamic run image part, because one, you'll need to generate that SBOM, and two, you'll need to attach it in some way, and all of this tooling has to somehow work. So those are like my only concerns.
And basically, you don't want like a two-step solution, building a base image first with a Docker file, and then.
I said that's completely fine as long as we don't end up with a binary that generates the SBOM in the output image. That's still fine to me.
So I think, Anthony, if I'm understanding correctly, the part of contention is, imagine you had Docker files and you had this idea of trying to bake in the SBOM, right? How do you execute arbitrary stuff on the run image and ensure that the SBOM gets generated properly while not baking in any of the tooling into the run image, or the final app image, I should say. You could still put it in the run image, but it should not be out in the app image. And typically, I think the solution that, why that has been proposed is for the rebase functionality. Right, so think about being able to do rebase with Docker files in a baked-in SBOM. And if you could solve that without tooling in the final app image, I think that would be the solution.
I think I get it. I think at least I think I understood from last conversation, right? That there's two ways. Either there's a tool inside the image or outside. Outside would be dramatically slow and painful, I would assume, right?
I don't think that's the case. Like you can, like SIFT works equally fast both in like inside the image and outside the image. The only reason like here, like when you're outside that one step, create, run dynamic run images, create the app image scenario, you can do a lot more. Like in your RFC, you have a lot more freedom on how you inject the SBOM. I think that's less so in the once we have the support Dockerfile RFC. And so and since that's like the immediate next step we will be taking, and that's probably going to be leading up to the next couple of platform and build-back APIs. It just means we're introducing something for one API that we'll be deprecating or having to figure out another solution for in just the next API.
I think I do appreciate the conversation. I think I'm definitely unclear from the support Docker files perspective. I think that's what's missing from me is exactly like what is unique about that workflow that makes it so, you know, contentious.
Is there like is there something missing? Maybe I'm not following, but the Docker files RFC said that the stack must, or whatever, a base image, build or run, must contain that gen packages binary, right? So that you can run it after you apply all the Docker files. But it doesn't say anything about, like, is that tool located in a layer, you know, so like that gen packages binary will be present in the final image unless you explicitly strip it out, right?
Yeah, I believe Sam is saying, hopefully, ideally, it wouldn't even be there in the first place, right, for the run image.
I mean, it can be in the run image. It's just the output image that I'm concerned with. It can be wherever we want it to be before the build has taken place.
So right now, I think the Docker files RFC doesn't have any mechanism by which we can strip it out of the final image, right? So you may want to augment, like, you know, I'm thinking like, maybe it's in a separate layer that you don't include in the final image. And then when you do a rebase, you check for either the presence of pre-populated SBOM or a gen packages binary, and you choose one way to get the BOM.
I think the other issue with gen packages is that it needs to be standalone for something like this layer stripping to work. It cannot have any other dependencies, otherwise you'll be polluting the run image with potential dependencies for that gen package binary, which is another big constraint we have not introduced in the build-backs API so far. The only thing that does something like that is the lifecycle, and we maintain responsibility for it. So those are the only considerations I had. Sorry, I need to drop for another meeting, but happy to continue this conversation on Slack.
All right. I guess the big thing I was getting from this was that we need to flesh things out more in the support Docker files RFC, which, to be honest, I'm not very intimate with as of right now. But even if we were to implement this, it'd likely have to change or be modified immediately, right? Which is a lot of waste of engineering effort. Was there any other perspectives on that? Any other questions? I know we have some Paketo folks on the call.
No, I was just mostly listening in to like kind of hear like what the changes might be and just kind of see where y'all's heads are at. I don't really have anything to add, just getting context. Thanks.
All right.
Oh, sorry, Anthony. I just have one comment. I know this was sort of deeply unsatisfying conversation, but like if there's any way that the RFC like on GitHub, because I feel like there's so much context that was talked about today and last week that I'm just gonna forget after this meeting. Like, is there any way to like track down all the points that were raised and put them in GitHub so that we can opine?
Sure, I'll try my best. I was going to say next steps for me is definitely to, give some context to Stephen. Like I said, he's been the other big voice in this, probably more than me. So and to have this RFC hinge on another RFC is sort of, I don't know, this other thing to deal with. So yes, next steps, I'll get it down somewhere somehow, preferably after a conversation with Stephen about the points raised today.
What's holding support Docker files back from FCP? Because that's the one you're referring to that it's hinging on, right?
Yes.
Thinking yesterday for Team Sync, we said Terrence and maybe Javier had requested changes at one point.
Yeah, given that, and I think Terrence's vote is essentially waiting on him to come back from vacation. I think you can assume that support Docker files is fairly stable, if that helps you, and potentially done. Just waiting a formal ratification kind of thing.
I think it is, right, but this one unanswered questions about what this gem packages interface looks like and what it does and how it makes its way into the final image, right? That's I don't know if we've clearly hashed it out yet. I think Sam is asking for us to not smooth over it and sort of hash it out.
Yeah, what's the I know this might be a little bit of a future topic, but what does the release schedule look like? Because from my perspective, it looks like support Docker files, that would be an FCP right now, that would go in. Is that really a thing that would be implemented right away? I know SBOM has a little bit more of a priority, it looks like right now. So I guess if Sam is okay with the SBOM related, to run images and stuff like that, and then we more or less, contemplate and simmer on the support for Docker files and really hash that out. Could we still roll out with your proposed solution, Anthony, and figure out the Docker file support after the fact?
I think so, right? I think the thing is nobody wants to do extra work, right? Nobody wants to implement this and then have to rewrite it because it didn't work out for support Docker files, right? This can be done, if you're talking about which one can be done first, this one can be done first, right? It's just about, I guess, making a mistake, right? And having to redo stuff.
Yeah, from what I gathered, everything that Sam said, it's really like, yes, there's like a long-term version and that's kind of maybe something to think about. But the contention is more or less the Genpack and how to solve the issue when Docker files come in, right? But if we say, okay, now we have this like SBOM thing, right? And we need to be able to regenerate that. And that's actually even part of this Docker files RFC, right? So even though it's an FCP, it sounds like there's more contention here, right? That I don't think it should be merged in, at least from, I definitely agree with Sam. I don't think that Genpack should be in the final image. So the support Docker files RFC should have a mechanism for excluding that, or specify a mechanism for excluding that from the final app image. And so to me, that's completely separate from run image SBOMs. It's just the only loose tie between them is that gen packages is related to SBOMs. But yeah, your RFC, again, I don't see a real holdup there.
Okay. Last question, because we do have another topic, but I guess how do you make a run image then with a Docker file with the SBOM in it and with the label telling you the digest of that SBOM? How would you do that?
Yeah, and to me, that's an easier solution, right? We could obviously provide tooling, but what is it? People could build their own tooling, right? Like they could literally do a two-step Docker file or a Docker file, then something that gives you the digest, and then a Docker file.
No, I agree. I agree with that. I guess I just I agree with that.
It does make it a little more complicated. I mean, I don't think this was fully thought through either, but like it makes it more complicated for a platform like Pack to say, okay, I'm just gonna take the Docker files, apply them to the run image, and then provide that to the exporter, for it to consume the extended run image, right? Like I think that was sort of assumed that workflow would be possible, but if now it was already the case that there was going to need to be some additional logic in place to like inspect the io.buildpacks.rebasable label and make sure that it was appropriately applied. And that it's right, like that's additional logic that the platform's going to have to implement. And now we're talking about additional logic that the platform needs for finding the layer that includes the SBOM, or I don't know, like I'm just confusing myself right now, but I don't know if there was like some hand waviness in the support Docker files RFC that maybe now we're running into.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think in that regard, that should be hashed out a little bit more. I think it's really close to getting solved, but it's just a little bit more work.
Appreciate it. I appreciate you helping me out at least hash out the conversation. Can we please do the next topic? Or at least introduce it?
Yep. So the next one is PackToml. This is a RFC I opened this week. Definitely take a look at it. I would love to get your feedback. The thing I wanted to discuss, if we have a second, is, and this is the motivation for creating this, was the images table RFC. And I'm wondering if we are to have some kind of PackToml or pack-specific configuration file, if the images table is something that we would want to introduce there versus in the project toml. And if I'm not actually sure if that makes things less complicated or not, but I thought it might be healthy or helpful to have this RFC open as we're trying to decide on the images table, because I'd like to support the folks that open that and bring it to some kind of conclusion. Javier, aside from the PackToml proposal itself, do you have any thoughts? And valid answer might be no, is if the images table should be specific to Pack, or if it should be general?
I think my position in a lot to do with the project descriptor is that from a platform's perspective, I'd like the same configuration to apply to as many platforms as possible. I know in this particular case, the idea of PackToml, from a user's perspective, it might get a little bit weird if you upload your project to something like Heroku that maybe underneath uses Pack and therefore would look at PackToml for configuration. I don't know if that's, the way that this is expected to work. But then there's like Scaffold and there's other tools that use Pack underneath it to provide their platform support. That's a little bit, again, it would be confusing that it works in all these platforms, right? But it's like a Pack specific configuration, which I thought only worked on my local machine, right? And then you go to something like Kpack, which doesn't use Pack, underneath, then it wouldn't work there, right? So to me, that sort of difference in platform behavior based on configuration files is still a little bit alerting. And again, my position is more on the other side where I want a single configuration to apply to as many platforms as possible and allow for the platforms to have some sort of configuration or enablement of capabilities or alertness to the user that certain things might not behave the way that they expect or yield the exact same results because of their own limitations or imposed limitations.
Yeah, it makes sense. I actually thought of it in one direction, and that, like the Heroku example where or any platform that advertises itself as a distinct platform but is actually using Pack under the hood, if it opts not to honor something, like I don't think that's jarring, but I think the inverse, which you described, where something is working on a bunch, like on Circle CI and Pack and Heroku, and then all of a sudden the same thing doesn't work somewhere else, that's surprising. So I think, I feel like it's okay for a platform to, as long as it's not masquerading as long as it's not advertising itself as Pack, not support something. But then it can get, I don't know. We have a whole bunch of issues like this. This is a real wrinkle because I was thinking the Pack specific configuration would make things better, but yeah, it might make things worse.
Yeah, because then you have to know under the hood, are they using Pack?
Yeah.
Weird
Right.
Yeah, I think Spring would be another one that isn't using Pack, but works very, very similarly.
Man, going through this images table thing reminds me of why we didn't do an images table at the beginning. There's so many little things like publishing to two different places. Like I guess that can just be like essentially one is a true publish and one is a push, and then and I'm not even sure how that works. Like, do you have to pull and then push, or maybe it just doesn't work with publish? I don't know. And then also like the previous build, like what if one has it and one doesn't? Do you just ignore it completely, or do you get the one that's available? Yeah.
Yep. Those are all the complexities that we run into. So yeah. Yeah, and just to make things even more complex, I know we're running out of time. Juan's been working on an OCI layout sort of functionality for the lifecycle that would then also be propagated out to the user, most likely for Pack. And I could definitely envision users wanting like a mix mash of stuff where they want to use a previous image from a registry, but then be able to still output to a local file system, right? And right now we just say daemon or daemon and or registry, right? We don't allow them to mix and match. And with the layout, local file system, I think we're gonna want to mix and match. So that kind of exacerbates the problem that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
The fun stuff coming ahead.
Yeah, I'll try to capture some of this in the images table RFC and make sure that those folks are aware of what we're talking about.
Cool. Yeah, and you could point them to the recording of this. Should have a URL.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. All right, that is the end of the agenda. Anything else before we wrap up? All right, thanks everyone.